This is the prep packet video for Unit 4, Chapter 9.6, and we're working on Objective 3, where we rationalize a denominator containing two terms. So before we were working on rationalizing stuff that looked like this. And we know that math etiquette says you can't have a radical in the denominator. So to get rid of that, we multiplied it by the same square root, basically 1, and ended up with the square root of 3 over 3. Well, if we have a term in the denominator that looks like this, where we have two terms, we can take care of this in a similar fashion by multiplying it by something called its conjugate. Here's a little vocabulary background for you. Conjugate means yoked together, like you would yoke, not an egg yolk, but the kind of thing you hitch up two oxen together with so they can pull the wagon. It's another thing that has to do with getting married. So in a way, we're going to deal with this by multiplying it by its spouse. Now, the conjugate of this term is the same thing, only the sign is different. So I have a 5 and I have a square root of 3, but instead of a plus, I have a minus. And what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And this is kind of cool because what it'll do is get rid of the radicals in the denominator. So here's another example. Here we have 7 minus 2 times the square root of 5. Well, its conjugate is 7, the square root of 7 plus 2 times the square root of 5. Square root of a plus the square root of b. The conjugate is the square root of a minus the square root of b. And the reason this works, and this goes back to when we were factoring quadratics, is if I have a plus b times a minus b, I end up with a squared minus b squared. The middle stuff goes away. If I actually took the time and FOILed it, I'd have a squared minus ab plus ab minus b squared. And those middle terms would cancel each other out, and I would have this. So that's why this is so helpful. This is one of the reasons I've just been saying, don't forget this, it's so helpful. Difference of squares, okay? So let's take a look and figure out why this is so helpful. So here's our first example, and we have 3 over 5 plus the square root of 3. To get rid of that radical, I'm going to multiply it by its conjugate, which would be 5 minus the square root of 3. And what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. I'm going to leave the top alone, so I'll have 3 times 5 minus the square root of 3. And there are times when you could factor that out, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. Now, I'm going to come down here for a minute, and I want to remind you of something. Actually, I'm going to come back here and do it. Remember how I had a plus b, a minus b? And you can do all this foiling work, but that's an awful lot of work when all you have to do with this kind of a pattern is say, this squared minus this squared. Make it easy on yourself. Remember, if it looks like that, square the first term, subtract the squared second term. So we're going to do the same thing back here. Here's my first term. 5 times 5 is 25. I'm not going to bother with the middle terms because I know they're going to cancel out. This times this, well, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. And I'm finding the difference. So in the next version of this, I have this. And what's left is 25 minus 3 is 22. There's nothing I can cancel. That's good to go. Let's take a look at this one. I have the square root of a plus b. And this is another reason why it's so important to be careful about just how big your radicals are. And here's b minus a, square root of b minus a. I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. So that's b, same as this, a, different sign. And once I'm done, I'm going to say square root of a plus b times square root of b plus a. I wish my handwriting were better, but I'm sorry it's not. I'm going to leave that the way it is. And then let's take a look and see what we ended up here. It's going to be this squared. So the square root of b squared is b. And it's going to be this squared. So it's a squared. And because it's difference of squares, we're subtracting. And again, there's nothing I can do with that. Or is there? Let me take a look at this. Hang on. Oh, I took time off and I've tried to figure it out, and I could have gotten fancy, but I would have just ended up with what I had before. So this is as good as it's going to get, and this is really good because it says the same thing as this, only we're following the rules, and this has no radicals in it. Okay, let's do another one. It says multiply 4 plus the square root of 3 by its conjugate. Well, first you have to say, well, what the heck is a conjugate? But you're so smart, you know this. It's 4 plus the square root of 3 times 4, same, minus the square root of 3. So this and this are the same, this and this are the same. The things that are different are the signs. Let's use our magic powers, and we know that that's going to equal 4 squared, which is 16, minus the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. So simplified, that would be 13. Let's take a look at this one. I have 3 over 6 plus the square root of 2. To cancel that out, I'm going to multiply it by its conjugate. Okay, and what I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So I'll have 3, 6, over, and again, I'm not going to do all the hard work. I'm going to work smart, not hard. And I'll have 36 minus 2. So in the end, I have 3 times 6 minus the square root of 2 over 34. Let's do this one. Square root of c minus d over square root of d plus c. Multiply by the conjugate of the denominator, not the numerator, just the denominator. So it's the square root of d minus c, square root of d minus c. In the next version, I have the square root of c minus d times the square root of d minus c. I'm going to leave that as it is. And then here, I'm going to square the first term, so it's d. And then I'm going to square the second term, so it's minus c squared. And that is as good as it gets. Okay, I know this was a lot, but you have all the skills you need to take care of this. All of that work we did with factoring quadratics, that same kind of stuff is going to come in really handy right now. I want you to do some more practice though, so do the U-Try problems on 568 and 569 and include the work with your prep packet. And that's it for this objective.